Yep, we're good. And we're live now. My name is Garland Nixon, and I'm here with the one and only Dr. Anthony Monteiro, live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon, and I'm here with Dr. Anthony Monteiro, a brilliant academic and a very good friend of mine. And we got lots to talk about right now. We haven't had him on in a while, and certainly want to get him on as much as possible. But he's a very, very busy man, leading people to all sorts of good works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Tony, welcome back to my humble YouTube channel.
Thank you so much, Garland. It's more than a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Let's start here. Let's start before we even get around the world here. I'm just throwing two things out at you and get your thoughts on them. Number one, they've charged Donald Trump with everything but, mopery on the high seas. And now you've got a couple of different states saying we're going to throw him off the ballot, right? All manner of lawfare against Trump. But it's not even about Trump, and let me tell you why. Also, something I've been reporting on lately, the news hasn't touched it, but 4 states, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, and Massachusetts have decided that in the Democratic primary, the only name on the ballot will be Joe Biden. Even though there are other Democrats, Marianne Williamson, for her weaknesses, I may not like her, Dean Phillips, I don't even know much about him, but they have certainly a right to be on the ballot. The Democratic Party has decided one name on the ballot, and of course, all the stuff that's going on with Trump. What are your thoughts on the level of lawfare that's being used right here in the United States to thwart what at least we had the illusion of democracy? We might not have had any democracy here for a long time, but they are not even bothering with that illusion anymore. Your thoughts, Dr. Monteiro?
Yeah, I think you asked the right question. And this is very dangerous from the standpoint of democracy, in spite of the fact that Joe Biden and those around him, including the Democratic Party and far beyond the Democratic Party among the elites, have decided that the nation cannot afford a democratic election for president, and that the nation cannot afford democracy as such, the foundation of which is freedom of speech and freedom of association. The ruling elite have decided that they have lost the people, and they have, and that the people, because they don't, that is, the people do not accept their control over the levers of democracy, the ruling elite have decided, contemptuously as it were, that the people are not worthy of a democracy. This is an expression of utter contempt for the people of this country. This is where we are. I don't know whether they'll be able to pull it off. Of course, they control the Democratic Party, and they're not going to permit even the slightest opposition to Joe Biden. Marianne Williams' position in the polls are very low. And the other man whose name I forget is not at all a factor. But they can't even allow for that. And so there's going to be a struggle in 2024 over whether or not we're going to have a democratic election. And of course, this kicking of of Trump off the ballot in at least 2 states, and I understand that 30 states have movements and are petitioning, groups are petitioning to kick him off using Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, which probably doesn't apply to him and wasn't intended to apply to a president. And then all of these lawsuits, most of which are frivolous. This is unprecedented in the history of the United States and probably unprecedented in the history of so-called liberal democracies.
I definitely agree with you there. And I think, in my opinion, what we're looking at is, I'll start here with something very specific. In this particular, in the context of this conversation, very early, one of the first things that we heard from the Democratic Party was, we're not going to have any debates. Remember that when RFK Jr. was in there, the assumption that people made was because of Biden, he has some issues with mental acuity, to be kind, and that they felt that he couldn't hold his own. Maybe so. I think there's something else to it. You know, I keep seeing these videos of people who are in the they're like a town hall meeting or whatever with a member of the Democratic Party representative, and they stand up and they ask them a tough question, or they bring up a tough issue, or they say, I'm not happy with this, whether it's Gaza, Ukraine, whatever, right? And rather than answer them, they get either the person hustles out, or they drown the person out, hustle them out. Here's what I think. They can't have a conversation because even a Marianne Williamson or a Dean Phillips or whoever these people are might pose a question to them or bring up an issue or expose some level of hypocrisy that they don't have an answer for, that they are so far from the people, they can't even have a conversation with their constituents anymore. And they can't stand in front of their constituents and answer questions about the policies of the party anymore. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because it seems to me that what they have lost is hegemony over the narrative. One of the central ways of controlling and I put quotes here, our democracy is, and the people in it, is to have dominance over the narration. And if you dominate the narrative, you set the criteria of what is truth and what is not truth. What is democracy? What is not democracy? What is, as they would have it, fascism, and what is anti-fascism? Well, they've lost narrative hegemony. And they are so fragile. In other words, to put it another way, their hold over government power in this country is so fragile that democracy in any form is a threat. The masses of people have said on any number of polls over several years that they don't think that the corporate media tells them the truth. They say it is not fair, it is biased. They do not believe that the corporate media can be considered legitimate. So if the corporate media says something, for example, that Trump is an anti-democrat and a fascist, people will almost in knee-jerk fashion accept the opposite. In other words, anything the corporate media says, the people will take the opposite to be closer to the truth. We have never experienced this. The The ruling elite rules and holds on to rule because they have controlled the flow of information and the explanation of information. They have lost that. Let's be clear, Garland. For them, this is the crisis of all crises from a domestic standpoint. They have lost control of the narrative, and they have lost control of the narrative because they've lost control of the people. The people are searching for alternatives, no matter what the package that alternative comes in. And that's what we're dealing with what in international relations they call real politics, real politics. What guys like you would call the real deal. And people do not feel that the truth will ever be told by the establishment, and that includes Biden. And if I could just say one other thing, the logic of this ultimately leads to what Antonio Gramsci, the Italian revolutionary and martyr in the 1930s as he fought fascism, said, "The old is dying and the new is struggling to be born." Another revolutionary of that same period said that the ruling elite cannot rule in the old way, and the people refuse to be ruled in the old way. In bourgeois political science, they call it a crisis of legitimacy. There's a crisis of legitimacy of such magnitude that none of the major institutions in this society is seen by the vast majority of people as legitimate, or to put it another way, have a legitimate claim to govern. And that includes the media, that includes the Congress, that includes the presidency, that includes the universities, that includes the experts, and you can keep going on down the line. And now we find out that it includes the major denominations of Christianity. People are leaving churches. Church denominations are splitting, going into hostile camps, because people are saying that those who run our churches, those who are supposed to be the moral guardians of society, do not have legitimacy to be that in the society today.
It's interesting. I'm going to tell you something, to give you tell you something. And as me, I mean, if someone asked who Garland Nixon wanted for president, I'd probably say Hugo Chavez, or somebody like that. But so I'm certainly not a Trumper by any stretch of the imagination. My ideology is on the other end of the spectrum. But let me tell you something that happened, and you tell me what you think about it. So neighbor is Jamaican. Young lady, 27 years old, has one child, and not impoverished people by any stretch of the imagination. And so they said, I was talking to her, and we were talking about different politics, and I said, I just figured, for what I do, I need it. I said, what do you think about Trump? She said, he's an asshole. He called my Trump, and he called my country, she's really an asshole country, right? Oh, she went on about how bad he was. He was a jerk. She can't stand him, blah, blah, blah. And then she told me she was going to vote for him. She talked about how terrible, didn't like him. And I tell you what it reminded me of when I heard her say that. It reminded me of the thing, and you've heard older black, all black folks in our generation have heard the older black folks say these kind of things, right? When my dad would talk about a racist person, you know, in his day, you know, the 30s, it was a whole, when racism had a whole different meaning back then. But he would always say, I'd rather have a Klansman in front of me. He said, I'd rather have a rattlesnake, because a rattlesnake's going to rattle before it bites you, than a copperhead, because a copperhead, you just walk up on him and bite you. It is, I want to know I want to see the danger. I want to know the danger so I can act on it. She said, I don't remember the exact words, but paraphrasing something like that. Well, at least I know what Trump is. I know who he is, blah, 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 blah. But she went to talk about the cost of things, the price of things, this country, and something that I could tell was intuitive. And you hear it with people, an intuitive feeling that this country's worse. This country's terrible. This country's going. And that you can't put into the numbers in the grocery store. It's an intuition that says, this place don't feel good. I don't like it. But you tell me what you think about a 27-year-old Black Jamaican woman who talks about how much she can't stand Trump. But basically what she's saying is, him and Biden are running. I'm voting for Trump. I was like, okay.
No, to me, it is not difficult to understand. And there are many paths in the political arena that lead to the same place, and that is to Donald Trump. She is saying, for example, I don't like him personally, but I think that under his presidency, my life and the life of my child could possibly be better because it can't get any worse. Another person, for example, take a Black man in the Black, as we used to call it, ghetto of Baltimore or Philadelphia. And I know Philadelphia better than I know Baltimore. This is a man, let us say, in his mid-40s. He stopped voting a couple of decades ago for local elections or national elections. But when he did vote, and when his mother and father and grandparents voted, they voted Democrat. They were loyal to the Democrats. This young man said, as far as his life is concerned, over the last 20 years, things have only gotten worse. And he looks around his community. He looks at other Black men like himself. He goes to the barber shop. He might shoot some hoops on the basketball court. And he says, none of us have much of a future as things stand. But going back to Bill Clinton, and certainly through Obama, we have been told as Black people that we only have one choice in parties to vote for. This Black man feels deeply insulted and betrayed by Black Democrats in the first instance, who has led him and have led most of us to this party, and they are part of the betrayal, but of the white Democrats. He sees in Philadelphia, and I'm certain in Baltimore, growing inequality. No matter how good things get for other parts of the population, they only continue to get worse for Black men. He has decided, as retribution, as payback to a party that lied to him and insulted him, I'm going to vote for the man that they hate the most, because I hate them and what they have done to men like myself, he would say. And this is get back time. And then again, there are many Black people, and this is not registered in the polls, who of course see their economic condition. And the economic conditions in substance have not gotten better for Black people in the last 4 years. probably worse, even though we're told that Bidenomics made things better for us. But they ask a very simple question. You can always find billions to send overseas to fight a war, be it in Ukraine or the Israelis fighting in Gaza, but you can never find the funds to make a city like Philadelphia more livable, to house the homeless, to educate the children, to open rec centers and swimming pools, to have after-school programs. Why is that? And why do I see a downtown with skyscrapers going up all the time, but in neighborhoods that Black people have historically occupied and kept up for the most part, we're being pushed out of because of gentrification? I think, they talk about the angry white voter. I don't think they've seen anything till they see the angry Black voter, and in particular, the angry Black male voter. I think the Black male vote, in particular, might be the final blow to end the Democratic Party as a nationally competitive party.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I see people saying different things in the chat. This is not a Trump is good discussion. It is understanding the dynamics of a crumbling empire, of a falling system. I think a big part of the system is their hands are so dirty. They've blown up, Nord Stream. They've done so many things when it comes to censorship. I put it like this, put it another way. The Biden administration has been involved in so many illegalities. They can't afford a person who is either honest or vengeful to come into office and to start turning over rocks. What if someone's vengeful and comes in that's not part of the system and says, let's take a look at what happened with this Nord Stream. I want people to come forward and tell me what happened. What happened if somebody who's vengeful comes forward and says, I want to know what's going on with Biden or Hunter Biden or Biden's money? And people in the FBI or elsewhere who maybe weren't happy about it now feel comfortable, and they come forward and say, it's time for me to talk. I'm going to tell you everything I know. So the other part of it is this. The machine, be it Biden and Republicans who are involved, all right, but the machine of politics in America now has gotten so brazen in their corruption and illegality that they cannot absolutely stand the possibility that anyone could come in and could start turning over rocks and looking at the things that they've done.
Yeah. Well, Garland, you were talking about in the chat, as soon as you present facts that represent the real political situation, there are people who become threatened. And I would say to those people, this is a time for the widest democratic discussion that we've ever had in this country.
Mm-hmm.
If you have become politically lazy or just a political opportunist, perhaps this type of discussion makes you uncomfortable. But sometimes in life, you should be made uncomfortable. What you assume to be should be questioned by you in the first instance. So anyone that would say, well, we shouldn't have this discussion, and how dare you or anyone like you say anything that is not negative about Donald Trump, that is outside the bounds. Well, I would say to those people, wake up. 48% of younger voters, that is 18 to 40, let us say, are going for Trump. Biden has lost the youth vote. He is quickly losing the Black vote. So are all these millions of people from vastly different demographics, youth on the one side, Black people on the other side, are all of these people delusional? Have they all been brainwashed by Trump? Or is there something objective in American politics that they are reflecting? And, coming from where I come from, I say I always give the people the benefit of the doubt. I always believe that in the long run, and we are in the long run, or as Baldwin called it, the long meantime, this is a time of reckoning, this is a time of truth. The system will be changed. It will be changed. After this election, and I don't think Biden will win for all kinds of reasons that we can discuss. After this election, we are looking perhaps at a new country being born. And I think that this will not be decided by Trump. This will be decided by the people. The defeat of Biden will be the people defeating him. And this election is not a matter of this issue or the other issue, although I think war and peace is paramount. This is an election over whether or not the people look upon the ruling elite, the deep state, if you will, and all that goes in to the ruling elite's control of this nation, including the bank system, the government system, the control of foreign policy, the control of the media. I think if Biden is defeated, all of that changes. And it will be the first electoral victory of the masses of people in a presidential election. The only thing I can compare this to, and I think Biden is going to lose, and frankly, Garland, I am not unhappy at that, and I will explain why. But the only thing in an election comparable to this was the election of Hal Washington to mayor of Chicago in 1983, where in winning the mayoral seat, he took down the most powerful democratic machine in the history of the United States. I think that the defeat of Biden will take down two of the most powerful political machines in the history of this country. The Hillary Clinton, Biden, Bill Clinton political machine, which is by far the most powerful, and the other one being the Obama machine. Both will go down. What will replace it will be decided by what the people do after this election.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think we're at a very dangerous time because of how I know that, and you know that, and the ruling elite know that, and they are desperate. So let's go out. Let's leave the country for a second.
Okay.
Or let's get into some foreign policy, because, and I think this is very much related, because it is a matter of the people at the bottom. Revolution. The people, what's at the bottom moves to the top, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that I discuss when I discuss geopolitics, international geopolitics, right, is the importance. I understand how the machine has always saw it. I understand the reason that the British, quote, ruled the waves and built all of those ships, because they understood the importance of controlling shipping lanes and routes of commerce. The Spanish Armada, that those big navies were always about controlling routes of commerce. Control the routes of commerce, the choke points, you control the world. You don't have to attack a country if you can choke off their choke points of their routes of commerce. And the U.S. has this giant navy. In fact, I heard Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice together on Jon Stewart, I believe. And Hillary Clinton was griping and complaining because China wants to build a blue water navy, right? Oh no, China wants a navy that can go all over the world, and we can't control the choke points anymore. Well, it looks like a bunch of guys in Yemen with some moderate but powerful technology, drones and weapons, have now shown that these empires can't control the routes of trade and choke points anymore. And if you can't control the routes of trade and the choke points, you are not an empire. In my opinion, your thoughts on what's going on in the Red Sea, the Houthi movement, the importance of that.
Well, Garland, I have to say, I don't think very differently than you do on these issues. And as I've said to you before, I enjoy the way you present these complicated foreign policy questions in such a coherent narrative form. So I want to congratulate you. I don't disagree, but I do think to understand the crisis in the Red Sea or the coming crisis in the Persian Gulf, you have to go back to the British Empire in the 1800s, the control of the seas, and then, of course, the control of the movement of commerce and the building, I think in the 1850s, of the Suez Canal. And the Red Sea is an entryway into the Suez Canal, or an exit. The Suez Canal is exits into the Red Sea. So indeed, the assumption of empire has always been to control the seas. That is the most efficient mode of international commerce, even up till today. The US empire has exceeded the British. Our Navy is beyond anything that anyone in the 19th or the major part of the 20th century could have imagined. However, and this, I think, might be a turning point, especially as relates to the Houthis in Yemen. The technology of war has changed, where a battleship, even an aircraft carrier, could be taken down by a drone or simple surface-to-surface missile, which the Houthis and anybody else has. So war will not be fought in the way that it was. In other words, the policy and method of gunboat diplomacy, where I sit an aircraft carrier off your shores along with cruisers and battleships and submarines and tell you to either give up or be destroyed. Now, a small nation like Yemen with a small military force like the Houthis can say to the US Navy, well, bring it on. Let's see what you can do, and let's see what we are capable of doing. And I think that's the story of modern warfare. We call it asymmetrical, and it is. The weaker knows how to exploit the choke points, if you will, the special points of strength and power of the so-called more powerful. It's like finding where the Achilles heel is. And I think this knowledge and this method of warfare is now more generalized. The Houthis know how to do it. Hezbollah knows how to do it. Hamas is showing us resilience and capacity that no one ever thought possible. And well, if the United States wants to wage a war against the people of Yemen or a war against the people of Lebanon, if that is what they want to do, like the Israelis have waged a war against the people of Gaza, well, then humanity will decide who is right. And in so deciding, the war makers are in a position that they've never been in before, where the majority of nations, the greater part of humanity, will isolate them and thus make it impossible for them to carry on business as usual, including shipping and international commerce. These lessons are 21st century lessons, and they apply not only to the Red Sea or the Persian Gulf, but they apply looking to the future to the Taiwan Straits, to the South China Sea. China doesn't need a two-ocean navy to deal with the threats coming from the United States. So I think, Garland, from a political and military technological point of view, the world is vastly different than it was, interestingly, on October 6th. You say, if you know where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the ways I put it, to use a maritime idiom, I guess, is or metaphor, is that Hamas punched a hole in the U.S. empire below the waterline. Right. What I say about the Houthis, I say is it's like a quicksand. The more you struggle, the sooner you seal your doom. If the U.S. empire says we're going to attack the Houthis and we're going to have a war in the Red Sea, that area is now determined to be a war zone, and no traffic will go through it now. So if you act to, it's bad enough that they can't get they're unable right now to get shipping traffic through to Israel, but some shipping traffic still goes through. If you attack them, it will have the paradoxical effect of so it's like to me, I look at it and I see a civilization, the Middle Eastern, the Muslims, an older civilization who sees a conflict differently, right? They're not there trying to steal somebody. They're at home and they're saying, this is our home. You're not going to come to our home and disrespect us and take everything we have. So we're willing to fight and we're not afraid to die. And are you willing to fight? And we can hurt you, but because the US is in the oil-rich, energy-rich region of the world, one wrong step in that region, you close down the oil market, you wipe out your own economy.
Yeah, I mean, you wipe out the global economy.
Yeah.
Some people seem to believe that the neocons, and frankly, let's keep it real, Garland, the Israeli government and Zionists, who have a stronger influence over the American Congress than the American people do, and certainly over the American presidency. This is not acceptable to the American people. When one poll showed that 70% of military-aged young people said they are unwilling to join the army and fight for their country. When has that ever been the case? That's never happened. So you get the Yemenis and the Houthi, who have a political consensus that says we will shut down the Red Sea, we will confront the US Navy until Israel exits Gaza. That's a consensus. Turkey, 90% consensus against Israel and the West. The Hamas is stronger today in Gaza and the West Bank among Palestinians than they were before October 7th. So throughout the Islamic and Arab worlds, there is a consensus reaching into the 80s and 90% of the population which are committed to guaranteeing, one, that Israel loses in Gaza, and two, that Israel and the United States will not be able to expand the war into the entirety of the Middle East, or what is more accurately called Western Asia. This, I mean, it is unbelievable. We have never seen this in modern history. If one studies the ideological history of the modern world, the balance of ideological hegemony, of political hegemony, rested in the West. Huge consensuses that said, we will go to war against darker people. We will wage genocide, be it in Vietnam, Korea, or wherever, against darker people. We will overthrow duly elected governments, such as Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, or the attempts to overthrow Fidel Castro, or the regime change operations against the North Korean people, and on and on and on. Today, ideologically, and by ideologically, I mean the worldviews of the majority of humanity, say that the West must be stopped, that the US must be put in its place, and that this is not going to go away. It's going to continue to grow. And I just want to say this. People seem to think that the only force that is credible is military force. That is not true. Ideological and political force is equal to military force, and in conditions of crisis, Trump, no pun intended, Trump's military force. I think we're looking at a thing where this superpower, this military force, the United States, is having its sense of hubris, its sense of the right to do whatever it wants, challenged in ways that ultimately the US will lose. And it's going to be an ignominious defeat. It is going to be a defeat from which the ruling class in this country will never recover, psychologically or politically. They're already in panic mode as we speak, because they don't know what to do with this Trump phenomenon, really with the American people. They just don't know what to do. Can I just say one other thing?
Sure, certainly.
When the American nation, the American people, begin to be in sync with, move parallel with the peoples of Western Asia and the Middle East. It's not the same, but these are parallel movements. When all across this country, American people are demonstrating, closing down the Rose Bowl, closing down JFK Airport, all across, so much going on, the press can't even report it all and doesn't want to report it all because it's too shocking for them. And they're all calling for a ceasefire. What are the people of Turkey calling for? A ceasefire. What are the people of Jordan calling for? A ceasefire. Saudi Arabia, and on and on and on. Here you have not only the nations, the darker nations of the world, the previously colonized people of the world in sync, but now the American people are in sync with the formerly colonized and yet imperialist dominated nations of the world. Historic.
I agree. I've never seen the level of anti-imperialism that I see now. The discussion of anti-imperialism, it's something you only hear in certain corners of the world, and in certain circles. And now we're hearing people around the world recognize it. Ukraine, interesting there. I followed it from the beginning. Of course, there was a war going on there since 2014.
Yes.
December of I believe it was the 13th or 17th of 2021, Russia sent a document. It said, "Hey, look, we need to talk about you." Well, I'll paraphrase it. You are encircling us with bases, and now you're going to take over Ukraine. Either we're going to talk about it or we're going to go to knuckle junction. It said either we'll discuss it or there will be military and or a technical response. They made it clear that the U.S. empire, you're not with that. I think Russia felt two things. Number one, we are now economically and militarily powerful enough to throw you off of our border. And number two, we don't have a choice. Because if you keep doing this, the next one day we're going to wake up and there's going to be nukes sitting in Ukraine, and we're not going to wait around for that to happen. So the U.S. empire, of course, the Biden administration said that ain't even a start for discussion. In other words, we are the hegemon. Nobody talks to us like that. We do what we want. And yes, we are surrounding you. And yes, we're going to eventually overthrow your government and take everything you've got. But there's nothing you can do to stop us. So you might as well shut up. I believe that when Russia punched back at the bully, everybody held their breath. Uh-oh, what's going to happen now? Right? What was interesting, the very beginning, here's what I remember. The beginning of the war, Russia started it and immediately announced, they said, our nuclear deterrent is on hair trigger. Basically let them know, don't think about it. If you're thinking about doing something crazy, then okay, we're taking them off a hair trigger. But I think it was a plan at the beginning to remind the United States, don't do anything stupid. After that, it seems to me, you look at Africa. Now the Africans are throwing the French out. You look at what's happening and people are pushing back. I think it's one of those instances where people were afraid of the bully. And when they saw someone punch back at the bully, everybody said, that bully's not quite as scary as I thought he was. And that's what we're seeing in Yemen. That's what we're seeing in Palestine. That's what we're seeing all over the world as people are saying, well, the bully's not as scary as we thought they were. And, now that I'm looking at them, they're not as rich. They're running out of money. They're running out. And basically, the Ukraine conflict exposed something. And there's no way to get back. The U.S. empire can never get that back. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Dr. Monteiro?
Well, I completely agree with you. I think what you're addressing is the power of example. At the start of this war, it was perceived that Russia was John McCain, the former senator, said that Russia is a gas station pretending to be a nation. Well, we now know that was a delusional, fictional construction. Because what has happened is that Russia has overcome all of the sanctions, and never have this many sanctions been imposed on any country in modern history. Russia has turned the tables. The sanctions, which were supposed to bring Putin down, now look like they're going to bring down the government of Germany. Already, I think Slovakia changed governments. The government in Hungary, which was supposed to lose, won and are now pursuing very anti-Western policies. Erdogan in Turkey was supposed to lose. My point simply is that people know what they're looking at. And I think in the end, they're not just looking at a bully that can't bully you anymore, but a bully who might not be around too much longer. And, if you talk about bullies, perhaps the greatest bully of all times is the Israeli regime. What they have done, and this is just going to a level of unbelievable savagery, what they're doing in Gaza. And let us keep it real. When you drop a 2,000-pound bomb on a neighborhood where there are schools, where there are nurseries, where there are health facilities, you're not aiming those 2,000-pound bombs at Al-Qassam fighters, Hamas fighters. You know that you're targeting defenseless children and mothers. You know this. But that's the bully. I will get thousands of feet up in the air where you can't touch me, and I'll drop a 2,000-pound bomb on you. But the people are going to have the last word. I remember back in the days, the Black Panther Party used to say, the power of the people is greater than the man's technology. And I think Hamas is proving the Panthers right. But I think Vietnam proved them right. I think people talk, Garland, I don't know whether you want to talk about a two-state or one state.
I don't know if you can see this book right here.
Oh, yeah.
People's War, People's Army. A book I'm working on right now. People's War, People's Army, the Viet Cong Insurrection Manual for Underdeveloped Countries by General No Nguyen Giap.
Yeah. One of the two greatest military generals of the 20th century. The other being the Soviet general that defeated the Nazis, Kuznetsov. But do you say you use that's bedtime reading for you?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, you're a very intense man. But, I think the bully has to be not only defeated by the people, but the bully must be brought to court. And this is the International Court of Justice. I think, though, a special court has to be set up to deal with this regime in Israel, similar and based upon the Nuremberg trials of the German Nazis. Because frankly, what we're dealing with is the 21st century version of German Nazism. And I make a distinction between fascism, which is an Italian movement and never carried out a policy of genocide and a Holocaust against a whole group of people. That is Nazism. And what we're looking at in Israel is a Nazi regime. And the great anti-Nazi struggle of this century, of the 21st century, is what we see going on in Gaza. I don't think after this that we can credibly talk about a two-state solution. The Israeli regime must be dismantled. Its leading figures put on trial for crimes against civilization, that the Israeli society must be denazified. When over 80% of Israelis, when polled, say that they want the harshest, most genocidal treatment to be brought down on the Palestinian people. And nothing is beyond what should be used against them. That population has to be re-educated and has to be denazified. Israel must be demilitarized, which begins with the United States ending sending these bombs and these tanks and these warplanes to be used against civilians and children. So what I am suggesting is that the Israeli regime after this, and a separate Jewish nation after this, cannot exist. But more than that, those responsible for these repeated genocides against the Palestinians must face trials as war criminals and must be given the appropriate sentences. This is the magnitude of what we're looking at. And all this talk about all we got to do is get rid of Netanyahu and get the next government to accept a two-state solution. What does a two-state solution mean to a lawless Nazi-type regime? They don't mean anything, because their whole reason for being is to break the law, to break agreements. You think that they will accept after this bloodletting? You think they're going to accept a Palestinian state side by side with Israel? I doubt it. But the Israeli population has to be denazified. They are comfortable with Nazism. And that's where we're at right now. It's, I think, as you have pointed out and as your questions suggest, the magnitude of this is such that just like after the defeat of Nazism, the world must change. The unfree must be allowed freedom. Regimes that have murdered and oppressed ordinary people, to put them in a cage called Gaza? Who does that? And claiming, and this is what is so horrible, to claim you do this in the name of the Holocaust that the Nazis in Germany carried out against the Jews, and you stand above human civilization and human morality? No. That type of arrogance is unacceptable in the world that is coming into being. We must eradicate it. It must be legally brought to the bar. Netanyahu is a war criminal. He is an enemy to human civilization and a threat to global peace and security. If this is not done, we will always be on the precipice of world war, including nuclear war. These are people in Israel and in the United States who, as the Greeks said, those who the gods would destroy, they first make mad. This is where we are, Garland.
You know, one last thing I do want to touch base that's related to that. And I've told this story, I'm sure you've heard it, everyone's heard it before, but it's appropriate here that on my show in Pacifica show in DC, a guy called me in September, early September, and said, oh, Garland, I'm mad. You know, the usual stuff. You wouldn't support Hillary in 2016, and you don't support the Trump, you're helping the Republicans, the usual, right? I got to choose one or two. I was like, I'm independent. I don't, no. Yeah, there's no such thing. You got to choose one and you're helping. Okay. Helping the Republicans, Trump, etc. And a couple of weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks after the Gaza conflict, that man called me up on the air. I didn't even remember, to apologize and say, I apologize. I was wrong. You were right. When I continually, I would bring up everything from, the 1953, overthrow of the Iran, and and I would go on and on, Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba and on and on and on, Haiti, you name it, and just say the United States government is a criminal enterprise. It's a criminal operation. And I would say all no, you got, okay. One of the things that I see happening in America, and I think the politicians don't even realize it yet, They see it like, well, there's a bunch of people walking around saying we're unhappy with this particular foreign policy. And that's happened before. People have been mad. Oh, I don't like the foreign policy. This one is different. I see people who are infuriated, people who are awake, people who are saying, I got mad because Biden promised student loans and didn't do it or something. Okay, that's one thing. But I see people now who are looking at that saying, oh my gosh, now I understand what they did in Jakarta. Now I understand 1 million dead Iraqis, 600,000 dead in Syria. They're starting to say people like Garland Nixon, who have been pointing out massacre after human catastrophe and genocide at the hands of the empire, saying this is who these people are. They never touched it. They never felt it. They never smelled. This was history. These were books. These were discussions amongst academics, intellectuals, etc. And now they're seeing it, touching it, feeling it. And they're saying, oh my gosh. And so I think the ruling elite don't realize this. You can't bring those people back from this, especially the young people. They're not going to come back when they turn 28 and say, I've decided to support the party again or whatever. This is something is happening that it's of such magnitude. The level of, as you said, savagery and brutality is more than they could imagine that their government would do or support. They were aghast and shocked. You and I aren't shocked. We know the history of these people. But these people are shocked, and they need to be shocked, because if they get shocked, then maybe they'll understand it like we understand it. Your thoughts on the effect of what's happening in Gaza politically, culturally, etc., on America and the young people of America, etc.
Yeah, in fact, I'm from the Vietnam era, and I remember the demonstrations, the anti-draft movement. I was drafted twice. I refused to ever go. I was prepared to go to jail if need be. Um, but the anti-war sentiment among the American people is greater today than it was at the height of the anti-Vietnam War protests. We are literally looking at an American people who, in the words of Martin Luther King, said, we don't want to study war no more. Now, Black people, Garland, you see, when we see children's legs cut off, when we see children blinded, that sends us back to the transatlantic slave trade in a certain way. It triggers certain things in us that I don't know that it necessarily triggers in everybody. There are Black people that'll never forgive Biden for this, and will never forgive the Black misleadership class for their complicity in this. I just think that there are times in history where things fundamentally change. I think we're in that kind of moment. In a lot of ways, it's dangerous, and in other ways, it's very exciting to be alive if you have fought and believe in change and the necessity of change. I want this to be a country based upon peace. I want to replace the military industrial complex with a peace industrial complex. I want all the ships, as I think, I forget the great song of the 1960s anti-war song, bring the ships home, bring them back home. Or that other song out of Motown, War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Or the beautiful song by the Isley Brothers, when will there be a harvest for the world? And when you think about the starving to death of the Gazan people, I think a UN report came out and said, yeah, 20,000 have died, but 500,000 on the doorsteps of death because of all kinds of intestinal, lung, and other kinds of illnesses. that they will die from over the next 5 years. The world's people need a harvest. We need an end to war. And I know on the 13th of this month, there's going to be a big march in Washington, and I want to be there. You know, I'm always, I come out of the Baptist church, and like they say, I want to be in that number. I want to be in that number. I want to be counted. I want my voice to be heard. And Garland, I'm not afraid of anything. And I will speak my mind. I'm not afraid of the Zionists. I'm not afraid of the war makers, the neocons, the John Boltons, the Victoria Newlands, the Robert Kagans, the Lindsey Grahams. You say your piece, I'm going to say mine. And let's see where the chips fall. But there ain't no fear here no more, because the cause is greater than any individual. And I want to be in that. I want to be in that. I want to see this thing brought to a conclusion. And I want to see the enemies of humanity be undone and be left out in the cold with no place to go, condemned not only by the world's people, but by the people of this country. That is their greatest fear, but it's going to happen sooner than later.
Dr. Tony Monteiro, you do great work with the free school. Where can people go online to find more out, to find out about your work, to see all of the things that you and your group are working on?
Well, we have a YouTube channel called the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. We're always on Facebook at our Facebook page, the Saturday Free School, and there are articles and there are lectures and radio programs. And we even have a Spotify station where you can hear what we do. And this year, we're initiating a year to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the birth of the great James Arthur Baldwin. And we're organizing Philadelphia and beyond to read Baldwin, to talk about Baldwin, to study the issues of war and peace. Baldwin said, when they kill a child in a village in Vietnam, they're killing one of my children. That's the kind of man and thinking that we need right now in this country. So that's what we're doing. And I hope people will find their way through social media. We have a Twitter account X as it's called, Instagram. Just put in whatever, in any of these platforms, the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. And you'll see us in living color, by the way.
Thank you very much.
And you'll see my wonderful and beautiful colleagues who are unbelievable, believe me.
Yes. Oh, I've met them, and I look forward. We get some decent weather in the next couple of weeks after the 13th. I want to come down on a Saturday and hang out and see what you all are doing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Monteiro. All right, everyone. Let me see. Thank you very much. And don't forget, everything's scrolling across the bottom. Follow me. There's ways to, if you can afford it, contribute. If you can't, just share this on all your social media platforms. The Saturday Free School, will find them on Facebook and YouTube, and find them on X, which is formerly Twitter, and keep up with all the great work Dr. Monteiro and his group is involved in. Share this on all your social media platforms. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. We're out.